You know that feeling when you walk away from a conversation and think, wait, what just happened? You were calm. You were clear. You just wanted to be heard. And somehow you ended up apologizing for their behavior. Yeah, that's not communication. That's manipulation. And if you've ever been in that position, if you've ever found yourself twisting your words, lowering your voice, or doubting your own memory just to keep someone else calm, you're not crazy. You're being managed. You're being handled. You're being shaped into silence. Here's the thing, nobody tells you manipulation doesn't always look like aggression. Sometimes it looks like charm. Sometimes it sounds like reason. And sometimes it's quiet. It hides in a sentence that sounds almost kind but leaves you questioning yourself. I've been there. I've sat across from people who can spin truth like a spider web, shiny, symmetrical, impossible to escape once you step in. And for years, I thought the way out was to argue better, explain harder, bring receipts, bring logic, bring calm energy. But every time I did, the story changed. Because manipulators don't lose arguments. They rewrite them. And that's the moment you realize this isn't a conversation, it's a performance. One person's trying to connect and the other's trying to control. So today, I want to teach you one question, just one, that ends the performance. One question that pulls the curtain back and forces truth to step into the light. You only have to ask it once. And when you do, you'll see everything you need to see. But before we get there, let's be honest about why it's so hard to ask. Because most of us who attract manipulation, we're not weak. We're empathetic. We're patient. We're the fixers, the explainers, the peacemakers. We want to understand people. We want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And that empathy, that's exactly what manipulators use as leverage. They read your compassion like a map. They know which buttons guilt will push, which stories will pull, which silence will make you panic. So you stay longer, you talk softer, you shrink a little, and the smaller you become, the safer they feel. You see, manipulation isn't about lies, it's about power. And power isn't taken, it's given, piece by piece, every time you explain yourself to someone who isn't listening. So if you're tired of explaining, if you're tired of being gaslit, guilt-tripped, and twisted into questioning your own reality, today is the day you stop playing. Because when you stop playing, they stop winning. And it starts with one sentence. One question. You'll know it when you hear it. Because the truth will show up not in their words, but in their reaction. By the end of this talk, you're going to know exactly what to say, how to say it, and what it means when silence suddenly fills the room afterward. This isn't about catching someone in a lie. It's about freeing yourself from the illusion that you owe anyone an explanation for demanding respect. So stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to break down how manipulators create the illusion of control and why you keep getting pulled into their storm. And once you understand the game, you'll never play it again. Let's talk about control. Because that's what this is really about. Not love, not communication, not misunderstanding, control. Manipulators don't fight for connection, they fight for control. And the reason they win, the reason so many of us get caught in their orbit again and again, is because they use a weapon we don't even recognize as a weapon. They use confusion. You ever notice that with certain people, clarity never lasts? You walk in feeling confident, grounded, maybe even rehearsed. You know what you want to say. And by the end, you're apologizing. You're doubting. You're wondering, was I too harsh? Maybe I didn't say it right. That's not communication breakdown. That's design. Manipulation thrives on disorientation. If they can make you question your own perception, they don't need to win the argument because you'll hand them the win yourself. Let me tell you something real. The most dangerous manipulators don't scream, they soothe. They use words like, you're overreacting, or that's not what I meant, or my personal favorite, you're remembering it wrong. And suddenly, your nervous system, that internal alarm that's been whispering something's off, gets overridden by doubt. You go from, I know what I felt, to, maybe I'm the problem. And that shift, that's the moment they gain control. They don't take it by force, they borrow it through your confusion. They build their confidence from your hesitation. They turn your empathy into leverage. And here's the kicker. They can only do it with your participation because manipulation doesn't work in silence. It needs reaction. It needs engagement. It needs you to keep explaining, defending, proving, clarifying. Every time you say, that's not what I meant, you're stepping back into their frame. Every time you chase understanding from someone who doesn't want to understand you, you're feeding the illusion that there's a mutual conversation happening. There's only a performance, and they've cast you as the emotional prop. That's how they win. Not because they're smarter, not because they're stronger, but because they've learned how to keep you performing while they stay in control of the script. And the hardest part, they make it look like love. They make control feel like care because sometimes they apologize. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they say, you know, I love you, right? Right after they've twisted the knife. And that small glimpse of tenderness tricks your brain into staying. Your body relaxes. You think, okay, maybe this time it'll be different, but it won't because real love doesn't demand that you abandon yourself to keep it alive. So what's the way out? You stop trying to out-reason manipulation. You stop trying to win a game that's designed to keep you spinning. You don't argue with a performance. You end the performance. You do it by holding up a mirror. Because when you hold up that mirror, when you stop explaining, stop proving, stop chasing, and instead you ask one clear, grounded question the truth can't hide anymore. It's no longer about who's right. It's about who's real. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. The one question that changes everything. I call it the mirror test. All right, here it is. The question that ends the game. The question that shows you everything you need to know about the person sitting across from you. What would taking responsibility look like specifically? And when will you do it? That's it. Simple, clean, direct. But let me tell you, this question doesn't just ask for truth. It exposes it. Because real accountability has a shape. It has detail. It has action. And when someone is genuine, they can describe it. They can say, you're right. I shouldn't have said that. Here's what I'll do differently next time. That's responsibility. But when you ask this question to a manipulator, watch what happens. Everything changes. Their face tightens. Their voice softens, or maybe sharpens. They start circling. They might say, why are you attacking me? They might sigh and say, you're so sensitive. Or they might go silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, punishing. And that reaction, that's your answer. They're not looking at the mirror, they're dodging it, because this one question takes away their favorite weapon, ambiguity. Manipulators thrive in fog. They need space to twist meaning, stretch timelines, rewrite events. This question eliminates all of that. It demands specifics and timing. It says, no more stories, no more smoke. It says, show me your accountability or show me your avoidance. And I'll be honest with you, most won't show accountability. They'll show you the performance they've been running for years. Deflection, projection, withdrawal. Let's break that down for a second. When you ask the mirror test, the first kind of reaction you'll see is deflection. That's when they make the conversation about your tone, your timing, your attitude. You ask for responsibility, and they say, I don't like how you're talking to me. Classic move. It's a redirect. The second reaction is projection. That's when they flip your truth back at you. You say, that hurt me, and they say, you hurt me all the time. You ask for clarity, and suddenly you're the problem. That's not conversation, that's inversion. And the third reaction, the one that stings the most, withdrawal. They go quiet, they walk away, they shut down, not because they're thinking, but because silence is their control tactic. It's punishment disguised as peace. They're saying, you don't get access to me until you drop this truth, but don't drop it. Don't fill the silence. Don't chase the closure, because that silence is their confession. It's proof that accountability doesn't live there. Now, you might be thinking, Mel, that sounds harsh, but it's not harsh. It's honest. You're not asking for perfection. You're asking for ownership. And ownership is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Without it, you're loving a ghost, a version of someone that exists only when they're being admired, never when they're being challenged. So here's what you do when you ask the question. Say it calmly. Say it once. Then pause. Don't explain. Don't defend. Don't fill the air. Because manipulators don't crumble under confrontation. They crumble under clarity. They can't breathe in clean air. And your stillness, your calm, your refusal to spin into their chaos, that's what starves the game. You'll feel the urge to soften it, to rescue them from discomfort. Don't. You're not hurting them. You're holding up truth. And truth has always been uncomfortable to people who hide from it. When you ask this question, you're not looking for an answer. You're looking for a reaction, because the reaction tells you everything. It tells you whether the person in front of you is capable of growth or addicted to control. It tells you whether the relationship you're in is built on truth or illusion. And it tells you once and for all that your sanity is not up for negotiation. That's the power of the mirror test. It doesn't change them. It frees you. Let's talk about what's really happening when you ask that question, because it's not just words. It's psychology. When you hold up the mirror to a manipulator, you're touching something fragile. You're pressing right against the foundation of their false self, the image they've built to survive. And that image, it isn't confidence. It's defense. For years, maybe decades, they've lived through a lens of control. Control gives them certainty. It gives them a sense of identity. They learned somewhere, maybe as kids, maybe through trauma, maybe through failure, that if they don't control how people see them, they'll disappear. So they build a mask. They decorate it with charm, intelligence, humor, power, anything that earns admiration. But underneath, there's fear, a deep, gnawing fear of being ordinary, of being exposed, of being wrong. When you ask that one question, what would taking responsibility look like, and when will you do it? You're not attacking them. You're pulling the mask away, and that terrifies them. Because without the mask, they have no identity. See, accountability requires a stable self. It requires the ability to say, I can be good and flawed at the same time. Healthy people can hold that tension. They can admit mistakes without collapsing. But manipulators, narcissistic, controlling personalities, they can't, because their ego isn't built to bend, it's built to defend. So the moment accountability enters the room, the ego panics. That's why they shift blame, change the subject, go cold. That's why they say things like, you're making me feel attacked, or this isn't productive, or you're being toxic. It's not logic, it's ego fragmentation. Psychologists call it that for a reason, because their entire sense of self begins to splinter when they're faced with truth they can't control. And the more fragile the ego, the louder the reaction. Let me be clear, it's not your job to fix that. You can't heal someone by shrinking yourself to fit inside their comfort zone. You can't love someone into accountability. Accountability is self-generated. It's a choice, not a gift. When you ask the mirror test, you're inviting them into adulthood, into responsibility, empathy, and self-reflection. But most manipulators decline the invitation. They'll trade growth for control every time. And that's when you have to stop personalizing their reaction, because their anger, their silence, their deflection, none of it means you did something wrong. It means you did something different. You stopped playing the role. You stopped feeding the illusion. And I know how hard that is, because if you're the empath, the helper, the fixer, confrontation feels like cruelty. You were raised to believe peace means agreement. But real peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of truth. When you stand in truth, you disrupt the illusion. And illusions don't go quietly. They crumble. That crumble, that's not your failure. That's reality reclaiming space. So when you ask the question and you see that flicker, that flash of defensiveness, the cold stare, the sudden retreat. Don't rush to smooth it over. That's the mirror doing its work. That's truth touching ego. And I promise you, you don't need to explain, defend, or apologize for holding up the mirror. Because the person who's meant to stay will lean in, they'll pause, breathe, and say, "You're right. I see it. I'll do better." The ones who can't, they'll run from it. But either way, you'll see them clearly for the first time. So what happens next? You've asked the question. You've held the mirror up. Now comes the part that matters most, reading what the reflection shows you. Because here's the truth. Not every uncomfortable reaction is manipulation, and not every quiet pause is guilt. You've got to learn how to read emotional honesty the same way you read body language. And that's what I call the reaction spectrum. There are 3 main responses you'll see when you use the mirror test. 3 tells that reveal who's standing in front of you, not the mask, not the performance, but the person underneath. Let's start with the first one. 1, the healthy response, reflection. When you ask, what would taking responsibility look like? And when will you do it? A healthy person doesn't panic. They pause. They might furrow their brow, take a breath, and say, wow, okay, I need to think about that. They might even get a little defensive at first. That's human. But give it a moment, and they'll circle back. They'll acknowledge what they did. They'll name it. They'll offer a change. That's what growth sounds like. It's not polished. It's not perfect, but it's real. Because emotionally mature people know that accountability isn't humiliation, it's evolution. They want to learn. They want to repair. Now, the second kind, 2, the defensive but teachable response. This person isn't manipulative. They're just scared. Maybe they've never had accountability modeled for them. Maybe they grew up in homes where admitting fault meant punishment. So at first they push back, they rationalize, they say, I didn't mean it that way. But here's how you know they're teachable. They come back. They reflect later. They take a step toward you instead of a step away. And when they do, that's your cue to meet them with grace. Because people who are learning how to be safe emotionally need safety modeled, not perfection demanded. Now, the third kind, and this is the one that changes everything once you see it. 3, the manipulative response. When you ask for responsibility, they attack, they roll their eyes, they twist your words, they pull out the emotional checklist, guilt, shame, blame. They'll say, you always make me the bad guy. Or why are you trying to start a fight? Or worse, they'll go silent, cold, punishing. They'll make you feel like you did something wrong just for asking for truth. That's the trap. And I want you to hear me. That reaction is not about your delivery. It's about their defense. They don't want resolution. They want control. And once you recognize that pattern, you can stop taking the bait. Because here's the secret. Manipulators are predictable. They cycle through the same 3 moves: deflect, project, withdraw, every single time they're asked for accountability. Different words, same blueprint. So instead of reacting, start observing. Because when you move from participation to observation, you take your power back. Here's how that looks. They deflect, you breathe. They project, you note it. They withdraw, you stay calm. That's it. You don't explain. You don't chase. You don't prove. You observe. And in that moment, you've already changed the dynamic. Because when you stop dancing to their rhythm, the music stops playing. Now, I know what you're thinking. What if I get it wrong? What if they're just hurt? That's why awareness matters. You're not judging. You're identifying. You're not labeling someone a monster. You're recognizing behavior that costs you peace. And the only way to know for sure which reaction you're getting is to do one thing. Stay silent after the question. Don't fill the space. Don't explain. Let the silence work. Because silence is the great revealer. A manipulator will rush to fill it. A healthy person will sit in it. And the difference between those 2 moments is everything. Your job isn't to change how they respond. Your job is to see it. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, you stop getting trapped in the same cycle. That's when the power shifts. And that's exactly what we're diving into next. Now that you've seen the reaction, it's time for the part that actually changes your life. Because awareness without action, that's just anxiety. But awareness with boundaries, that's power. This is the moment where everything turns. Because when you stop reacting and start observing, you flip the script. You move from being controlled to being in control. And let me tell you something important. Taking your power back doesn't mean becoming hard or cold or distant. It means returning to yourself. It means remembering that your peace, your energy, your clarity, they belong to you. They are not public property. So how do you take it back? You do it one pause at a time. The first step is the pause. When they deflect, you pause. When they guilt trip, you pause. When they twist your words, you pause. That pause isn't weakness. That pause is mastery. Because manipulators feed on reaction. And every time you don't take the bait, you starve the dynamic. I want you to imagine that pause like a wall of glass between you and their chaos. They're still talking. They're still spinning. But you're watching now. And when you're watching, you can finally see what's really going on. That's when you start to separate their behavior from your responsibility. You realize, I didn't cause this. I can't fix this. And I don't have to lose myself trying. The next step after the pause, reclaim your narrative. Because manipulation rewires your story. It teaches you to see yourself as reactive over emotional, dramatic. But that's a lie built to keep you quiet. So I want you to start saying, that's not my story. Say it out loud if you have to. When you catch yourself spiraling, over-explaining, just stop and say, that's not my story. Because the moment you name it, you interrupt the script. Then you document reality, not for revenge, not for evidence, but for your sanity. Write down what happened. Journal their exact words. Because manipulation blurs truth, and writing clarifies it. When you see the pattern on paper, it loses its magic. And here's the third piece. Protect your energy like it's sacred. Because it is. You don't owe access to anyone who abuses it. You don't have to answer every text. You don't have to explain your boundary. Silence can be a boundary. Distance can be an act of love for yourself. And this next truth is big, so hear me clearly. You can walk away and still care. You can love someone and still leave them. You can wish them healing and still protect your peace. That's not cruelty. That's maturity. That's clarity. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to step out of the illusion and let the truth stand alone. Now listen, the first time you hold this kind of boundary, it will feel wrong. It will feel unnatural. You'll question yourself because you've been conditioned to equate calm with kindness and confrontation with conflict. But standing in truth isn't cruel. It's clean. And as you hold that line, something incredible happens. The noise in your head starts to quiet. You stop rehearsing what you'll say. You stop defending yourself in imaginary conversations. You start feeling steady again. That's the power shift. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's silent, grounded, and unshakable. And from that stillness, you'll see what's next, the aftershock. Because the moment you reclaim your control, the manipulator loses theirs. And when that happens, the entire dynamic starts to unravel. Let's talk about that next. What happens when you stop playing the game entirely? When you finally stop reacting, when you stop chasing, when you stop explaining, everything changes. But not all at once. At first, it feels strange. It feels like silence, but not peace yet. Because when you walk away from someone who feeds on control, they don't congratulate you for growing. They panic. That's the aftershock. And if you've ever held a boundary for the first time, you know what I mean. The moment you stop playing the game, they start losing control. And they will do anything to pull you back in. They'll call it reconciliation. They'll call it just wanting to talk. They might even show up with tears, apologies, promises, or scripture. Don't fall for the performance. Because when you stop feeding a manipulator, they don't seek healing, they seek supply. And your silence, your calm, it drives them wild. Because the one thing they can't control anymore is you. You'll feel it in their texts. Why are you being so cold? You'll feel it in their tone. I guess you don't care anymore. You'll feel it in your guilt, that quiet whisper that says, maybe I went too far. That whisper isn't your intuition. That's conditioning. You were trained to believe peace means compliance. You were taught that being kind means being accessible. But let me remind you, kindness without boundaries isn't love. It's self-erasure. So here's what happens next. When they realize they can't reach you emotionally, they'll shift strategy. They'll try to rewrite the story. They'll become the victim. They'll tell mutual friends that you've changed, that you're selfish, that you've lost yourself. They'll sprinkle half-truths in public, hoping you'll defend yourself. You don't need to correct the record when truth stands on its own. Because what's really happening behind the scenes isn't a smear campaign, it's desperation. They're trying to rebuild their image by controlling the only thing they can still manipulate, perception. But perception isn't truth, and you don't live in their story anymore. And here's the beautiful part. Eventually, the chaos stops because manipulation only survives with attention. And your absence is the one thing they can't rewrite. In that stillness, you begin to feel something new. It's quiet, yes, but not eerie this time. It's clean. It's the sound of your nervous system remembering what safety feels like. You stop jumping at every notification. You stop rehearsing imaginary conversations in your head. You stop needing to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. That's peace. That's what freedom feels like. But freedom has an echo. When you step out of the storm, you'll still hear its wind for a while. You'll miss the intensity, the attention, the drama, because your brain got used to chaos as connection. That's normal. That's detox. Don't mistake it for love. You're not missing them. You're missing the version of yourself that believed peace had to be earned. And this is where the shift becomes permanent, when you finally realize that their collapse is not your responsibility and your silence is not cruelty. It's consequence. The truth doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to prove. It just stands steady, calm, undeniable. And when you stay in that truth, everything false begins to fall away. That's the aftershock, the death of the illusion, the birth of your peace. And what comes next is even more powerful, learning how to live in that peace without fear, guilt, or apology. Because once you see manipulation for what it is, you stop fearing the silence that follows. And you start living in it like it's home. Take a breath. You made it through the storm. And if you've been listening closely, you know this wasn't just about them. It was about you. It was about the version of you that kept handing out explanations to people who never earned them. The version of you that thought love meant endurance. The version of you that confused peace with silence and chaos with connection. That version of you is surviving. This version, the one sitting here now, is awake. So let's bring it all home. When you ask that one question, what would taking responsibility look like? And when will you do it? You're not interrogating someone. You're declaring a standard. You're saying, I don't live in illusion anymore. You're saying, my peace matters more than their comfort. You're saying, truth is the only language I speak now. Because here's the thing, truth doesn't chase. Truth doesn't beg. Truth doesn't need validation to exist. It just stands there, quiet, solid, undeniable. And when you choose to stand beside it, you stop being part of the performance. You stop being the mirror that reflects their fantasy. You become the reflection of your own reality, grounded, honest, unshakable. And that's the real power of the mirror test. It doesn't expose them. It reveals you. It shows you where your boundaries live. It shows you where your healing begins. It shows you the part of yourself that's been waiting to stand up and say, no more pretending. Because the truth is, the people who are meant to walk with you, they won't flinch at that question. They'll look right back at you and say, "You're right. I see it. Let's fix it." Those are your people. The rest, let them go. You don't need to chase closure from people who run from honesty. You don't need to collect apologies to validate your worth. You don't need to keep performing to prove you're good enough. You've already proven it by walking away from what kept you small. So as you step forward, I want you to carry this truth with you. Silence is not emptiness. It's space, the kind of space where you finally hear your own voice again. That's what peace sounds like. That's what freedom feels like. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's steady. It's sacred. It's yours. And when you reach that point, when you can hold the mirror, stand in the silence, and stay rooted in truth, you'll realize something profound. You never needed them to see you clearly. You just needed to see yourself. So ask it once. Listen fully. Then walk in the direction of truth and don't look back. Because your life, the one built on honesty, peace, and self-respect, it doesn't start when they change. It starts the moment you decide you don't have to. And from that moment on, you're free.